Hello, good afternoon. I'd like to thank the Broadbent Institute for inviting me here today to introduce our next speaker, who is one of our students. I'm Paul Robinson. I'm a professor at the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Ottawa, where we run a master's program in Public and International Affairs, which trains our students in this kind of knowledge and research skills they'll need for a career in public policy, very, very broadly defined. And this year we've introduced for our master's students something we call directed research placements, which allows us to give them university credit for going to an outside institution and doing some research for them. And the very first student to receive one of these placements is Ayaka Naganuma, who will be giving the next talk. And she's been doing a directed research placement for the past 3 months with the Broadbent Institute and Clement Nokos there. Ayaka has experience in local government in Japan, as well as experience in regional revitalization and UN communications. Her research focuses on climate adaptation, disaster resilience, migration, and social infrastructure development, working with various institutions. She's passionate about policy analysis and the intersection of climate policy and economic growth. She's also one of our star students who was just this week awarded our Imagination Scholarship Prize because of her excellence all around. I would like to thank Clement and the Broadbent Institute for giving Ayaka this opportunity to do research for them. If you are impressed by what you hear and you feel that your institution could benefit from a similar student, please feel free to contact me, Paul Robinson, at the University of Ottawa, and we can help you find a suitable master's level student to do research for you. As I say, they're well trained in public policy, generally speaking. On that point, I will hand over to Ayaka, who will present now the results of her research for the Broadbent Institute. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for being here today. I'm so excited to share my research on workforce adaptation and labor mobility in Canada's just transition, with policy recommendation to support workers and communities through this shift. This is the outline of my presentation. And to begin, let me provide some context. Canada has committed to achieving net zero emission by 2050. This goal is crucial for community and climate, which inevitably requires profound structural changes, especially within high-emission industries. Such challenges risk significant economic disruptions, including job losses and broader impact on local communities. So ensuring just transition that fairly support workers and communities is essential. Existing policies emphasizing shifting from high-emitting industry to low-emission industries, such as energy transition from coal to renewable energy. However, direct job transition remains challenging. Workers in high-emission industry face several barriers, including limited transferable skills, wage disparities, stronger local ties, and geographic challenges, and unbalanced regional employment opportunities. Additionally, some research highlights current policy also often overlook workers and labor unions' perspectives. Recognizing these gaps, my research aimed to better understand labor mobility within Canada's high-emission industries, and what might limit workers from transitioning to lower-emission industries, and propose more feasible and diversified job transition pathways. To achieve this, I analyzed labor mobility trends, identified key factors, and economic assess occupational similarity based on economic and employment data, and evaluating existing transition policies in Canada. Let's first discuss about labor mobility trends. Overall, short-term labor mobility across industry remains stable. However, long-term mobility shows considerable variation depending on the industry and regions. Specifically in Canada's mining, oil, and gas sectors, long-term mobility rates are higher in regions with fragile economic structures on declining local industries. Workers are more likely to relocate when local jobs shrink, emphasizing the need for local proactive policymaking rather than reactive responses. Let's move on to the analysis of factors associated with labor mobility. My analysis showed that short-term labor mobility has weak correlation with economic and employment variables. However, the high-emission industry stands out, demonstrating relatively positive correlation with factors. For long-term mobility, the analysis showed a strong positive correlation with employment structure, regional economic factors, and union participation, emphasizing the key role of unions. In contrast, mid-career age group, 24 to 50 years old group, and vocational certification and occupational categories showed negative correlation, highlighting barriers in mid-career transition, as well as skill recognition and verification. So last analysis is about occupational similarities. Using principal components analysis, I identified occupational similarity based on employment structure, PCA1, and labor market fluidity with regional factors, PCA2. The closeness from mining or gas occupation, represented by the blue circle center pin, indicate the potential for smoother job transitions. For example, supervisors in mining or gas suggests a higher potential of easy transition with manufacturing and natural resources roles. However, similar occupations have lower tier level that are placed in a category indicating lower skills or minimal education requirements. It raised concern about reduction of wage as well as decreased job qualities post-transition. So similarly, underground miners and drillers also closely align with manufacturing occupation, but also face lower tier levels. My analysis also found that at the blue center pin, there is a significant industrial differences in PCA2, market fluidity, and regional factors between high-emission industry and manufacturing. It indicates the need to adjust wage gaps and other economic factors when we consider its just job transitions. Finally, mine service workers similarly have transition opportunity in manufacturing as well as natural resources roles. So once again, particularly manufacturing sectors have a potential for smoother transition of three occupation in high-emission industry that I mentioned in the presentation. However, ensuring a fair transition requires preventing income loss as well as protecting job quality despite lower tier levels, and bridging gaps between high-emission and manufacturing industries. Turning to the policy evaluation, current Canadian policy provides fundamental support for workers, but are inadequate in addressing key issues such as wage declines, lack of support for non-standard workers, and misaligned training programs and poor strategic coordination. As Canada's transition to a net zero economy, ensuring workers are not left behind is essential for sustainability. So to achieve this, I propose 3 policy pillars: managing economic shocks of the transition, and designing sustainable career pathways, building a robust next-generation employment ecosystem. So recommendation 1 is aimed to safeguard workers' income and livelihoods to reduce the impact of the economic shock. One approach is implement long-term wage insurance, which offers displaced workers subsidy to cover up to 50% of their wage differences post-transition. Additionally, expanding pension benefits, as Germany did for coal industry retirees, and providing enhanced support for temporary and vulnerable workers are key to softening this economic transition shocks. Secondly, recommendation 2 aims to support workers for smoother transition with understanding of workers' limited labor mobility as well as their needs. Establishing an integrated cross-sector training system and implementing a skills passport and tailoring training program based on regional and occupational characteristics are essential components of a just transition package. Labor unions should take a leading role in advocating for and shaping these initiatives to ensure workers' needs effectively. Beyond worker transition, Canada should establish a next-generation employment ecosystem focused on sustainable job creation and economic resilience. To do so requires a strong industrial policies and strategies to guide industries through this shift into the next generation. Strategic tax incentives and investment policy in the region will encourage industrial diversification beyond renewables. Strengthening labor unions and cross-sector collaboration will support smoother workers' transitions, and repurposing high-emission sites into EVs and renewable energy sites, and creating sustainable value chains between sectors like EV manufacturing and mining will drive regional economic growth and resilience. So in summary, current policy focused in addressing wage disparities and labor mobility limitations and effective investment. Labor unions and industrial policy are needed to overcome the limitation of market-led transition. Furthermore, policy development requires a deeper and micro-level analysis and direct engagement with stakeholders, particularly workers and unions. This study relies primarily on macro-level data, so additional qualitative analysis is crucial to understand the limitation and the on-the-ground realities. Ultimately, strong cross-sector collaboration and partnership are essential to ensuring a fair and resilient transition to a sustainable net zero economy in Canada. Thank you for listening.